Hello and welcome. I'm Alexis, and this is the beautiful Kelly Dawn. And we're going to be discussing all things about life and business and the journey that we've been on. We'll probably touch a little bit on confidence because that's something I'm interested in hearing other perspectives. And let's just dive into it. Now, Kelly Dawn, she is a beautiful author, mentor, coach, and what else? Seer, which I thought that's a very interesting description. And she has a new book called Practical Guide to Luciferian Witchcraft, which it sounds very, very interesting. So we'll hear a bit more about that later. And if you are interested in hearing more from Kelly, she's on Facebook. I think you're on Instagram as well. And you've got a group called Feral Woman Collective. So that's a very cool place to go hang out. And she's got lots of interesting things to go find out about. So, got to jump into it. Now, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on. And I
Oh,
want
thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. I would love to hear about the journey that you've been on because the last 10 years or so have been like an explosion of it's just been amazing to watch. And I've watched Kelly I've known Kelly online for quite a few years and it's been a while since we've chatted. And I am just amazed at, how you've grown and evolved. So I'd love to hear more about that. So
Yeah, it
where
has
did you start?
definitely been a journey. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to like that little version of me and I'm so proud of her, but at the same time it's like, oh my gosh, I was so scared of everything back then. And when you and I first met, I had just started coaching. And
Mm,
I think it was before I even started charging. Like I was just getting my feet wet. I had just been certified as a holistic life coach. And all I wanted to do was help people manifest what they wanted in their life. Because prior to getting into coaching, I struggled with drug addiction, alcoholism, eating disorders. I was stuck in a 9 to 5. And I felt really trapped by life and I dove into my spiritual practice and into personal development and gathered the tools and resources that really helped me create what I wanted in my life because at the time that I started coaching, I had started a housekeeping business. I had left my 9 to 5 years prior and completely transformed my health. I was really living a life with intention, basically. And I remember sitting there one morning. I used to get up really early before I started cleaning houses. And my dog, Oliver, he was a little puppy at the time. So he'd be on my lap. I'd be drinking my coffee and I'd be reading my Tony Robbins books and my law of attraction books and my manifestation books. And I had been applying all these different things that I was learning and seeing results. And I remember thinking, I bet there's someone out there who doesn't want to get up at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning and read these books. They just want someone to help them guide them through the process so
mm,
they can create what they wanted. And that was like the light bulb moment I had. And I honestly thought at that time, I'm going to get certified as a coach. I'm going to build a website and I'm going to tell people what I do. And that's going to be it. It's going to be so easy. And then I got online and then I started sharing content and telling people that I could help them. And it was like every fear I had around being seen, around self-worth, it all came to the surface. And I would be nauseous. Like I remember posting a selfie with a Facebook post was like the most, oh my gosh, nerve-wracking part of my day. Like it was such a struggle to put myself out there. And I feel this is really common for people when their business is tied to their purpose, when they're
mm,
really committed to doing the work that they love to do, but it's something that's coming from them. It's not just, something like web design or housekeeping or a service that's slightly detached from their mission and purpose. And I guess it was just through a lot of practice and a lot of putting myself out there, feeling absolutely queasy and being vulnerable and being open to the criticism that is it's going to happen in the online space. It doesn't matter who you are. There are going to be people who have different opinions, who
mm,
can be quite rude and hostile, and just developing that thick skin and trusting that the vision that you've been shown is important. Like it's meant for you to do the work that you're called to do. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been given that vision to begin with. And
mm,
I feel the biggest part of my journey, the biggest, if I were to narrow it down to one thing that's helped me over the last, how many years it's been, It's been being committed to that vision instead of what my current reality was presenting me with. And that's a huge thing I do with my clients. It's always tapping into, what do you truly desire? What's that vision that you have for your life, for your business? Let's get clear on who that version of you is, because it's still 100% you. It's just the version of you who has moved through the fear, who has done the inner work to get to that place where they're showing up in that fullest expression. Holding yourself true to that vision and showing up in the world to the best of your ability as that version of you, regardless of how nervous you feel or how scared you feel. Because a lot of people feel like they can't show up until they're confident, until they feel like they're solid and grounded. And, once I have this level of confidence, then I'm going to rock it on social media. I'll be doing live streams and reels and all of this stuff. Well, that confidence only comes from doing things that you don't think you can do, or the things that feel really scary. And it's like building a muscle. I always love using fitness analogies. It's like going to the gym. Like, you're going to build up that confidence muscle over time. And then the things that at one point in time were terrifying for you, that's just second nature.
Mhm.
And it's also important to note that there's always going to be bigger, scarier things that are available for us to move through. It's all part of the game. And once you get in that flow and you just become the person who does the hard things, it makes life so much more enjoyable, especially if you have an online business, because there's just so many different things that we can be doing out there. But it's
Mm.
that resilience and that confidence that just gets built up over time. So that's kind of my journey has just gone from being absolutely terrified of even having a profile picture. I'm not sure if you remember, I used to have Hello Kitty as a profile picture because I could not put my face on the internet. I was so, so scared. And I can laugh about it now, but that's where I was at. And it's just loving and accepting yourself through that entire journey, knowing that as long as you keep moving, you are going to see the growth.
Yeah, and I do feel it's a matter of practice and just keep moving through it, because the more that you actually do it, it is building that muscle. Honestly, there's things that I've done throughout my little online journey that, and that's a whole nother story, but you put yourself out there and you get big. And then I personally went to a place where I contracted, and I contracted hard, and I went,
Mhm.
see you later, I'm out. But coming back out, and it's basically like going back to the beginning and just stepping back out, and you just got to keep growing, and you got to keep pushing, because otherwise you'll keep contracting and then everything falls into a pile and you go, what's the point of this? Where am I going? What am I supposed to be doing? But the more that you grow, it's more like you get more, that you allow the channels to open up, and you actually allow more to come in and go, oh, I can actually have this dream. Oh, I can have this vision, or whatever it is that's bigger than me, instead of going, oh, woe is me, and what am I doing? Just none of us really know, do we? We're just kind of going with it, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing too. I remember looking at people in the online space thinking, oh, she has everything all figured out. Look at how successful she is. She's probably never afraid of anything. And then you get in rooms with some of these leaders and people that you've looked up to for years, and you're like, they're still scared. Like, they're
Hmm.
still human. No one has it figured out. We're just kind of taking that one step at a time and being led by the vision. And the only difference between those people and the people who are deciding not to move forward due to fear, due to lack of confidence, is that those people just push through. That's the only difference.
Hmm. Yeah, it is very interesting, isn't it? Because we're such different people. Like, we have all these unique personalities, but then you've got all these commonalities too. It's like fear, and whatever that looks like for people will either stop you, or you will push through and you will create from a different space. But it's a matter of, you've got to keep coming up to those walls and deciding, are you going to allow that to stop you, or are you going to allow it to be just a learning curve, and I'm going to push through it. I'm going to, bash that thing down. So yeah.
Yeah. And growth is really part of our natural expression anyway. Like, when you think of a little kid who's learning how to walk, no parent is going to be like, "Oh, well, you stumbled, I guess no walking for you." It's like, no, you're going to keep up and keep practicing until you get it. You're going to get it. And it's
Mhm.
like anything in life. Like, we always have the choice to just decide that no, it's not meant for me, and stay where we are. We always have that opportunity available. Or we can be like, yeah, no, I'm going to keep going until I get this. It's going to happen for me.
Yeah. exactly. Um, so I'd like to hear, because I'm very, very interested, um, where you went from the cleaning business to stepping into the coaching and the mentoring, and then what's happened in the last 8 years. Because I also would like to touch on, if you don't mind, you had some health scares that wasn't last year, I think it was the year before, and just kind of what that actually, like any lessons or anything you wanted to share about that, totally up to you. But yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit uh, how you actually, like, where did this vision come from? And I don't think any of us really know, but how did that actually evolve? Was it part of your daily routines, your rituals that helped you kind of mold to where you received that information, and how you actually came to the next space of going, actually, I want to do this and I want to help people in this way? Want to chat about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it definitely evolved over time. And I remember when I started my cleaning business, I thought that was going to be it for me. I loved the work. I had really good intentions of having a residential cleaning business side of things, as well as like a handyman, outdoor, like gardening, lawn cutting side of things. I had the whole vision planned out. And then I was booked with clients fairly quickly. And I was at the point where I was needing to hire someone if I wanted to grow. And I remember sitting in a Tim Hortons coffee shop interviewing people, and it was like, this is not the path. This is not what I'm meant to be doing. And everything just felt so wrong. And it wasn't just that feeling of this is new and uncomfortable. It was like, you're not meant to be doing this. And so that was fairly soon into my cleaning business journey, but I just decided to be a one woman show. I did that. That started in 2013. And I gradually moved into the coaching space and got my feet wet and got a better understanding of how I wanted to help people, what I wanted to do. And I let that evolve over time. I didn't go full time until 2017. So that was a fairly lengthy journey. But the big reason why I wanted to work online is because I wanted to be home with my dog. And like
Mhm.
some people think like they need this massive, like huge thing to push them forward. But when you take a look at your life and you're like, I love certain aspects of what I have going on right now, but I want some things to be different, allow those things that you would prefer to be the guiding vision. And what I would do is I would write out my ideal day. And so I'd take my journal every morning and I get myself into this place of just expansion. I'd be like, okay, if I could wave a magic wand and wake up today and have today go exactly the way I want it to, what would that look like? And
Mhm.
a big part of that vision back then was being able to take Oliver for a walk in the park and not check my watch. Because
Yeah.
back then I didn't start cleaning houses until 9 or 10, but I was still on a schedule. And I also love to grab a coffee at McDonald's and go and sit in the park and read and work from coffee shops and just have a lot of flow and ease in my day. And so I took those components of the vision, like, okay, how can I make this a reality? And then it was through learning about the coaching industry, taking classes, hiring mentors, all that things that I got to the place where I was able to do that full time. And then even from that place, like I didn't just hop online, start coaching, and it had to be like it wasn't like a linear
No.
path at all. It was always tuning into, okay, what would the next level version of me be doing? And I would notice that I'd be rolling along in the business and things would feel okay, but it's like, okay, there's something that needs to shift here. There's something that needs to come more into alignment. And I remember a really big part of that was around being more open with my witchcraft practice. And this is going back years ago because
Mm.
there was a time when I was talking about magic and witchcraft, but it was very surface level. I don't really want to say surface level, but it was a lot of mainstream witchcraft stuff, like the
Mhm.
moon phases and crystals and things like that, which are all fantastic. But in my own practice, I was working with demons. I was doing sex magic and blood magic. And I had this massive fear that if people found out what I was doing behind the scenes, they would think I was this evil, horrible person, that they wouldn't want to be in my world, that I was going to lose all my followers and all my clients. And it ended up being one of the best things ever because some people did leave, some people were uncomfortable, but other people were like, oh my gosh, you're into this, I'm into this. And they
Mhm.
love the fact that someone that they knew, that they trusted, that they could relate to, was on a similar path, and that we could have open discussions about it. And that was a really great example of that fear coming up and deciding, like, no, this is the vision that I have. I want to be more open with my people. I want to share this aspect of my world with them. And it was such a great moment just because it brought the community closer together. And then the people who were meant to move on, that gave them the opportunity to be like, you know what, this isn't for me. And then they were able to go their own way as well. Um, and then it was, what was it, when I had the stroke? It was 2017 when I had the stroke. And at that point in time, I was moving into creating physical products in my business. I wanted to start a candle line, do spell kits and things like that. And I had a lot going on already with my current client load. And at that time, my dad was also sick. So I was taking care of him, taking him to multiple appointments at the hospital per week. And I was out with Oliver in the morning. We used to play frisbee every single morning. And I was coming back to my apartment and I noticed that my legs started to go numb. And at first, I thought that I had just twisted something in the park. Maybe I twisted my hip or something. And as I got closer to my apartment, I noticed that the numbness was moving through my entire left side of my body. And long
Mm.
story short, I had a stroke. I was in the hospital for a week. And that was one of those moments where it was like, okay, things need to change. We need to reevaluate. And it was a really interesting time because I felt like I was just in limbo for those 7 days. I felt like everything that I thought I knew about my life and my business and the trajectory, it's like, no, that's not what's going to happen. Um, and so that was one of those great reset moments, I feel, in the grand scheme of things. And it also made me realize how short life is. And that's one thing that we hear all the time, right? Like, life
Yeah.
is short. We only have a limited time in this incarnation. Do what you love. But it was like, no, we really, really need to focus on what we love doing. And that's always been an undercurrent of the work that I do, whether I'm talking about magic and witchcraft or just creating your life with intention. We have such limited time in these human forms. We really need to be focusing on what makes us happy, what lights us up. And if other people don't really want to get on board with us, with our vision, that's okay. Like, not everyone is meant to be with us on that journey. And I forget what your other question was. So we're going to roll along with that. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm just enjoying listening. And
Okay.
it's funny because I didn't realize it was that long ago that you had the stroke because it feels like it was only like the other year, but 2017 isn't that's more than a couple of years. So it's quite
It feels like
interesting
a couple
time.
years ago, though.
Yeah,
I
time
still
has
think
been
the
very
90s are 10
interesting.
years ago.
Oh my goodness, me too. And I'll just share quickly. My eldest has been singing a lot of songs, and we've been watching shows from the 90s, and all the music from the 90s I love, and I cannot get enough. And they come on and I go. My eldest will be 17 this month, and he's singing along with 90s stuff. Like, you're cool, dude.
Gosh.
But that, like it's just yesterday. Yeah. So anyway, I don't remember what the other question was, so we'll just um move on. Um, so with moving into, we'll skip forward, and I really want to hear about your book. I'd love to hear about, but actually before we do, I want to kind of tap into, where do you draw the line at sharing um like all of your the stuff that goes on in your life? Do you have boundaries as to what you do share and what you don't, or are you in a space where you're kind of happy for everyone to know everything that's going on? I'm just interested because the online world is so diverse, and I know for myself, I don't share a lot of personal stuff because that's just where I am at the moment. But I'm wondering, when you hide things, is it hiding stuff or is it just protecting your privacy, do you feel? Or do you feel like you're kind of an open book and you don't have any kind of concerns as to what you share? I'm just interested to hear that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I'm fairly open. Like, the version that people see online, that's me. Like, I'm the same person behind the scenes. And I do share quite a lot with my personal life, but I also feel like there's a really nice boundary there. I never feel like I'm sharing things just to be vulnerable with my audience, or, oh, I better do some behind the scenes stuff and show people I'm a real human. I never have that feeling. And I don't feel the need to share everything. There's a lot that goes on in my life that I never ever talk about online. And that's
Mhm.
not really an intentional thing like, oh, they can't know about this. It's more of a, I don't know. I think this has just kind of come through practice
Mm.
and sharing fairly openly and knowing that like I have shared some things and then afterwards I'm like, oh, you know what? Probably didn't need to do that. Probably didn't need to put that on the internet, but I did. I do have, I don't really want to call it like a hard and fast rule, but I guess that's the best word for it. If I'm moving through something that is particularly challenging, growth wise, emotional wise, I usually don't talk about that stuff until I'm on the other side of it, until I can
Yeah.
talk about it from a place of power. Like I don't use my audience as a therapist. That's not
Mhm.
what I do. And so, and I know some people they're online and they're bawling and they're crying and that's what they feel completely comfortable and called to do that. And that's amazing for them. But there was a phase in the online space where it seemed like people were almost forcing themselves to show up that way in
Mhm.
order to prove that, oh, look, I'm a real person, I'm a human, I'm vulnerable, just like you. And it had this air of like fakeness to it.
Yeah.
So I know I'm pretty raw and real, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff I just I don't feel called to share. It's just like nobody's business. Or I do enjoy sharing some of those raw bits and pieces once I'm on the other side, because as a coach, I turn everything into a learning experience, right? I can be
Mm.
going through like the biggest shit show ever in my life. And afterwards, I'm like, hey, this is the gold that I extracted from this experience. And I
Yeah.
want to share that with people just to remind them that life it's not rainbows and unicorns. And it's really easy to fall into that trap of thinking that when you see people in the online space, because we're all sharing our highlight reels. We're all sharing like the things that we're proud of, the things that we're excited about. But at the end of the day, we're humans and we still go through some really rough times. But when we can go through those times and come back to our audience and say, hey, this is what I moved through. This is what I learned. This is what I discovered about myself. Here's some things that maybe we'll do different next time. I feel that's really valuable because it shows other people like this is a human being who does not have all their stuff figured out. They don't have all the answers, but at the
Mm.
same time, they're in the trenches doing the work just like the rest of us.
Yeah. I think that's important. And for me, it's kind of wondering is like, have I gone through this enough to actually be able to share anything about it? No. Okay. And I do feel like you really need to kind of tune into yourself and really decide, is this something that I'm willing to let people into, or is this still too raw for me right now? And so I know
Yeah.
some people talk about, the dark night of the soul and, going through all these, dark times, but I do feel like when are you actually through it? Sometimes it can be years before you actually move out of those spaces. And for some people, that's great if they're willing to actually share from that space. But other people is like, for me, I don't want to share until I've actually received the lessons from whatever it is that I'm going through. And I'm very, very cautious because I'm not willing yet to answer any questions about it. But I'm also wondering, is it fake to kind of just continue on doing what you're doing and still hiding that part? Or is it just you're looking after your own energy and the space that you're in and going, I'm not quite ready. I need to have this boundary. And it doesn't have to be like that forever. But this is where I'm at, right now. So I'm just wondering, I know you had the week in hospital. Did you have any times where you did have those darker times and then you've come out of that?
Yeah, I went through a period. It wasn't like I was going through a bad time, but there's a period a few years ago where I felt completely disconnected to my witchcraft practice. And at that point in my business, my entire work was all centered around witchcraft. All my branding, every program, everything I had as far as content, it was all around empowering women to connect with their own inner witch in some capacity. And in my own practice, I was feeling like I was going through a dry spell, which I feel is normal regardless of the spiritual path that you're on. There are going to be times where you're just not feeling it. And at first I thought, okay, it's a dry spell, it's no big deal. Well, it went on, and then it started to feel really gross because here I was marketing as a witch, all of my programs, everything centered around that identity. And my own practice felt like something that was a million miles away. And I came out and I told people, I sat with it for a while, and it definitely was not a hasty decision I made. And I came public and I said, you know what? I've been feeling really detached from my practice. I don't feel like I even identify as a witch anymore. I need to
Mhm.
just kind of figure things out with my own spiritual path. In the meantime, I'm making some changes to my business because one thing that absolutely drives me crazy with the online space is people who market themselves as a witch because it's trendy. You see it all the
Mhm.
time at Halloween. It really, really bothers me. And I never wanted to be like inauthentic in my marketing. And so I said, I'm going to change gears a little bit. I'm going to be coaching on mindset and business. And those are things that I had a track record in anyway. And I just put the spirituality and the witchcraft thing aside, knowing that if it was meant to come back, it was going to come back. And I got so much hate for that. I had so many people sending me the nastiest DMs because I had abandoned my path. And oh my God, it was ridiculous. And I'm like, you
Mm.
people need to get a hobby, like seriously. But it's so funny. I had so many people upset with me during that time, and then afterwards, like I have talked about it a couple times publicly, and I put a post up. I think it was sometime within the past year. I forget when it was exactly. But when I talked openly about how stepping away from witchcraft was one of the best things I did for my practice, and I explained why, tons of people came out of the woodwork saying, oh my gosh, I've done the exact same thing. I'm like, ah, there we go. This is why
Mm.
we share. This is why we talk about these things,
Mhm.
because something that some people tried to shame me for and got all upset over, that very thing is something that helped other people come forward and be like, hey, I've experienced that too. So it's okay to not always be on when it comes to our spirituality.
And that's important too, because it's funny if you're getting all that hate and then you turn around and go, actually, and you share the lesson that you've actually received from it, and then you have all these other people and go, my story has actually helped them, and you haters can go away. And I feel
Yeah.
like with those haters, obviously you triggered them so much that they just had to go, because it was revealing something within themselves that they didn't want to know about. That's why they had to go and hate on you. Go do some deep work.
Yeah.
All right, I want to talk about your book. Tell me all about the book and how
Awesome.
it came to be because I haven't read it. I'm not really called to read it, but I'm interested because I love hearing from authors and, hearing about the stories of how these books actually evolved. So please tell me.
Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh. So the book idea first came through back in 2020. And I love Facebook for showing the memories because I'm horrible when it comes to remembering time and dates. And then it pops up. I'm like, oh, it was 2020. Okay. Thank you, Facebook. But I had been working with Lucifer and the demonic since 2016. And in
Mhm.
my own practice as a witch, that's something that I had a ton of fear around, but also a lot of interest. And back then, when I was first getting into demonology and Luciferianism, there were some great books out there, but there wasn't anything that really spoke to me. I didn't really vibe with the whole sinister aspect of demonology and that side
Mhm.
of things. And I wasn't approaching it from like a very religious viewpoint. I
Mhm.
saw these entities as spiritual allies that we could partner with, that we could work with, but I wasn't finding a lot of information out there that felt comfortable for me, that felt like it was like, oh, this is exactly what I want to read. And after working with these entities for a while, I thought, why don't I just write the book that I wish I had? Like, why don't
Mhm.
I just write my experiences down? I'll share the way that I've worked with these entities. I'll talk about the different things that I do with them on a very practical level to give people an entry point into this world if they want to explore it. And so in 2020, I sat down to write it and things just started to flow. I was up to, I forget how many thousand words, but I had most of the book written. And at that time, I was also throwing in everything I knew about witchcraft. I was like jam packing it full of all this information. And then it's like I hit a wall. It's like everything just stopped. I'm like, okay, writer's block, no big deal. I'll set it aside and I'll come back to it when the flow picks up. And I'll stick with the discipline and I'll push through this writer's block. Well, it never really went away. And I started editing the work that I had, and I would get so frustrated. I'm like, I hate all of this. This sounds horrible. And I had everything chopped into like little edited pieces. And I got to the point where I scrapped the entire project. I was like, if this is meant to be, it'll come through me at another time, and it's going to come through with a lot more ease. Like,
Mhm.
obviously, the work is going to be involved. I understood that, but it just did not feel right. And so I put it on the back burner. I continued on with my practice. I had that, I think it was around 6 months or so that I took off from witchcraft altogether. That happened after that point in time. And then I moved out here. I moved from the city to the country back in 2022. So I live in the middle of the woods, a completely different lifestyle than what I used to have. And I got back into my spiritual practice in a really deep way. And all of a sudden, the nudges for the book started to come through. I'm like, oh, okay, the book, it's all right. It's going to come coming through. Things are going to get put into motion, but I didn't force anything. I'm like, all
Mhm.
right, we'll just kind of let it be. But I still talked about being the author of this book. I still knew that it was meant for me. I just didn't really have a timeline for it. And then it was around mid-September. I remember taking a picture for social media, and I was kneeling. I'm looking over at my altar. It's right here in front of me. I was kneeling in front of my altar, and I took this picture, and I remember looking at it going, that looks like a very stoic occult author photo. And it's like something clicked, and it was like, you need to write the book now. Like, you need to get this in motion. This book needs to come through you. And that was mid-September. It poured through in a few months and ended up being a lot different than what I expected it to be, because the earlier version was packed full of information. This version is quite short. It's not a very lengthy book. I have it here. It's pretty thin,
Mhm.
but what's inside are exercises to fortify your energetic body, meditations you can do, and some really simple rituals that people can do if they want to start working with Lucifer, the demonic, as these allies who can help us not just get things, because demons have this reputation in the spiritual world as being the entities that you go to if you want to get money, if you want to get laid, if you want power, you call on a demon, and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. They have that reputation, but that's really not been my experience with them. They have definitely helped me in terms of manifesting my desires, but a big portion of the work that I do with them is shadow work and
Mhm.
inner work. And they have the ability to help us really go deep within and see those things that we don't want to look at, because it's those things that we hold shame around, those things that we feel are ugly about ourselves. And while they can be brutal entities to work with when it comes to their energy, like you, I really feel not everyone is meant for this path, and that you need to
Mhm.
have a certain amount of inner work under your belt before working with them safely, just because they can crack you open, and they're like, oh, you want to change, you want to grow, here's what you need to do, and they will show you things, and you're like, oh, okay, I wasn't expecting this. But when you have that foundation built up, it can be really impactful and really beneficial. But the book is a guide for people who are drawn to work with Lucifer and the demonic in a safe, effective way, in a non-ceremonial magic kind of way. That's a system that's out there that works for a lot of people. I've never vibed with it. I don't see these entities as being above us. I do use the term demonolatress, which means like I worship demons, but I worship everything. Like, I feel everything is sacred, everything is divine, including other human beings. Like, we're in this deep connection with everything else around us. And when it comes to working with these entities, I see them as partners that I have a relationship with. There's no hierarchy here. Yeah, so the book came about as a practical guide for people who want to dive into this work and get their hands dirty and work real magic and get out of that space where they're just consuming information. Because I know for myself, I love to consume. I love to sit there with a good book on magic and witchcraft and just
Mhm.
read about different perspectives and get into the intellectual side of things. I feel people who are drawn to this path, that tends to be something that's very easy for them to do. But
Mhm.
getting your butt in front of the altar and getting into that space where you're doing magic regularly and you're working with spirits regularly, if that's the path that you're drawn to, that is the experience that needs to take place in order for you to really have a better understanding of what the path is. Otherwise, it just stays this cool idea that,
Mm.
might be fun to do, might be cool to connect with these entities. But if you're not doing it, if you're not forming those relationships, you're just barely scratching the surface of what's possible if you're meant to work with them.
It's like the embodiment of what you've actually learned and actually bringing that through. holding that energy within you and not just having it out here. Because I love learning and I love all these different concepts. And a lot of it used to just stay around here. And I would live up here because that's, that was my
Yeah.
happy place. And then I've had to learn, especially the last few years, of like really bringing whatever it is that I need and bringing it into the body and really embodying whatever it is that I want to share rather than going, oh, la di da, and just that very spacey and yeah, very spacey. I can be very spacey. So the embodiment is actually what helps ground and to actually go, hey, you've got a human existence here, bring it down and actually if you want to do anything with that energy, then you need to bring it into your body rather than not and just being a space cadet. Because I mean
Yeah,
that is
it's
a
so
lot of
interesting.
fun.
I had that experience with tarot years ago.
Mhm.
I had dipped my toe in the water when it came to doing intuitive readings for clients, and I had this whole story created that I need to master tarot before I ever did readings. And so I was taking courses, I was reading books, and I was very up in my head intellectual about it. And I was noticing that everything, it felt like the information was up here and it just wasn't getting through. It just wasn't coming through me. And I was like, why is this so hard? Like, I've read all the books, I've done the journaling, I've done the exercises, I've done these practices, yet it doesn't feel like anything's clicking. And finally, I was like, I'm just going to be a tarot reader. I'm just going to start incorporating this in a deeper way into my work. And I'm not going to worry about what the traditional meanings are. I think it's important to have an understanding of what they are, but I'm going to trust my intuition with this. And
Mhm.
the moment I decided to do that, and I just took on this role as someone who was an intuitive reader, I already had this base knowledge, but it wasn't until I put things into practice and stopped relying on the information that I was getting from outside sources that it became embodied. And then it was like, oh, okay. And then all of the information that I had learned, it's like everything clicked into place, but it was finally able to come through the practice and not just like not doing a reading where you're pulling the cards and then you're checking the book and you're pulling the cards and you're checking the book. But no, this is what I'm seeing. This is a message coming through you. And yeah, again, that was definitely a practice that got me to that place where I felt more confident with it. But I love that you shared that because that embodiment piece, it's so true with whatever we're doing. There's a time and a place for learning, and then there's a time and a place for that embodiment and integration. And that's when we really develop the wisdom is through that practice of the embodiment.
Yeah, and I love when I see your readings and that they're only short. I love them. It's like, oh, that's perfect for today. Oh, thank you. Because quite often I will see them because you're 15 hours behind me. I'll see them and it might have been for the day before, but it's still perfect timing for where I'm at in that moment. It doesn't matter when you see things. Sometimes I've seen things that were 3 days before. I'm like, oh, I love this. And it's just
Yeah.
I love that. And it's interesting with the embodiment piece because the intuition, you really need to get out of your head. And something that I've learned, and it's a trust piece as well. It's trusting that you'll receive whatever messages need to come through. Because quite often I used to be very much, I've got to think it and I've got to, really analyze and, you do all the reading. But when you just kind of, it's almost like you got to step out of it and step out and step in. When you do that, it just flows through. And honestly, I don't even know half the time where stuff that comes through me, where it came from. I'm like, awesome. As long as, for me, if I've held a high intention or just the intention that it is for the greater good, rather than I don't go into big spiels or anything. It's like, oh, it's got to be blah, 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 and all the lovey dovey, all that. As long as it's to the highest intention, like that's kind of covers everything for me. Whatever comes through, sweet. Okay, cool. And I don't like fluffing around. So it's like sometimes you need a quick, short message or just to the point. And some people might find that a bit blunt. I prefer blunt over wishy-washy, flashy, kind of fluffy stuff. So yeah, embodiment, very important. And I do feel that going back to the confidence piece, the more that you trust that, the more that you practice that, the more that it just evolves. And it's like you've become this person that maybe 10 years ago you didn't even know was possible. And you've become something greater than what you maybe even ever dreamed, or you dreamed and you didn't think it could ever be. So, yeah, very interesting. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up unless there's anything else you want to share. Is there anything interesting that you're doing at the moment that you want to share?
As far as interesting things, I feel the book is it's still the big thing. It just came out a few
Oh,
days ago. So that is still the main thing I
congratulations.
have going on. Oh, thank you so much. I do have mentorship open. I do readings. All my services are on my website, but I do
Mhm,
like professional witchcraft services and everything now. I do want to mention something going back to what you said around the timing of
mhm.
things that you see online.
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and even though I don't do business coaching specifically anymore, something that does come up is a fear of their post not being seen and content not going out at like the right time. And it's so interesting because with the way the algorithm works, I've had that experience too, where they'll see a post that I put up like 6 days ago, and they're like, oh, that came at the exact right time for me. And
Hmm.
so it's really important for us, if we have an online business, to remember that there are millions and millions of people in the online space. And if you have a message flowing through you, it's meant to come through you at that time. Just post it, put it out there, and the right people are going to see it. Like a belief that I hold is the right eyes are always on me. Like they're
Hmm.
always going to see the post at the right time. Don't get caught up in, oh, I have to post at this time or that time or any of that nonsense, because that just gets in the way of the creative flow and the message that wants to move through you.
Yeah, it's really getting out of your head. I do find because
Yeah.
that's been my biggest
Yeah.
stumbling block. Is like these are all the reasons I cannot do this, and then go, oh, I'm going to do it anyway. And it's basically rewiring the brain to go, even if you are, you're really scared, you got to just step into this, and you don't even have to make these big, massive steps. You just got to take those little steps. And once you've taken those little steps, they grow into bigger steps. And where you actually were, you've taken all these little steps, is actually, it could have been one big leap, but because you've taken the time to actually take the small steps, you've actually helped grow your capacity. So you haven't actually fried your nervous system, which is one thing
Yes.
I'm very aware of, that you only work to the capacity that you're at. And you can stretch the limits and you can push the boundaries, but you've got to be so aware that you can you can take those big leaps, but what about your body? Because your body's still going to tell you what's going on. And if you fried yourself, you're going to wipe yourself out, and then you're not good for anybody. So building capacity is, that's something that's come up for me lately, is like the only way you build capacity is to practice and to take the small steps. So yeah. Oh, okay. So thank you so much for coming. I absolutely adore talking with you. And let's see, we can find Kelly at kellydawn.co, and she's on Facebook and Instagram. And if you're interested in what Kelly's up to, she's also got a Facebook group, Feral Women Collective. Amazing space, lots of beautiful people. And yeah, so thank you. And we'll chat another time. So
Thank you
thanks,
so much for
everyone.
having me.
You're so welcome. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and I hope you have a great day.